Hello and welcome. I'm Ananya Datta and I'm back with another edition of Race to Power. Coming up in this broadcast, the United States President was again called Genocide Joe by protesters. A war far away from the American territory is on the ballot of this year's elections in the US. The question is, how worried should Joe Biden be? In India, less than 48 hours to go for the first phase of elections. Political parties and their star leaders are pulling out all stops. We tell you what's happening on the ground. As the US elections draw closer, the chants against Joe Biden are growing louder. In the past 3 days, pro-Palestine protesters have taken over several cities in the US. And at the receiving end of the slogans is the incumbent president eyeing a re-election bid. These are visuals from outside a culture center in Joe Biden's childhood town of Scranton. Here, several supporters gathered from both sides of the spectrum. Some were local supporters, while others were pro-Palestine demonstrators. As the gathering waited for the US president to address them, many protesters could be heard chanting the slogan, "Biden, Biden, you can't hide. We charge you with genocide."
How many kids have you killed today? How many kids have you killed today? Biden, Biden, you can't hide. We charge you with genocide.
Let's take a look at New York now, where dozens of Google employees are out on the streets to protest. Hundreds were seen raising objections against the company's billion-dollar contract with Israel. This is not a one-off incident where the people of America have accused their president of enabling a genocide. Just on Monday, protests were seen in the cities of Chicago and Seattle, where protesters waving Palestinian flags blocked key highways leading to the international airport. Then on Tuesday, protesters in San Francisco shut down the landmark Golden Gate Bridge, bringing traffic to a complete standstill. Hundreds of cars lined up on the suspended bridge as protesters chained themselves to parked vehicles. Police arrested about 20 protesters at the bridge and traffic resumed in the afternoon. More than 6 months since Israel declared war on Gaza following Hamas's assault on October 7th. Regular protests have rocked the United States and thousands raised questions over the country's foreign policy towards Israel. The protesters have accused the US government of being complicit in a genocide as Israeli forces continue to bombard across the Gaza Strip, with thousands already killed, and the number continues to rise. With less than 7 months left in the US elections, there is concern over how these protests play out for Joe Biden in the run-up to the presidential polls. On the show, we have talked about how the Arab Muslim community in the US is already miffed with Biden over his pro-Israel stance. Just a few days back, we saw how an annual White House event during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan was downsized to a meeting and dinner with staffers only, as Muslim and Arab leaders refused to attend a Ramadan dinner hosted by the US president. Now, the marches and demonstrations against Joe Biden give rise to two important questions. Will the mass protests reflect on the ballot for the Democrats, or can Biden count on domestic issues like abortion rights to overshadow the humanitarian crisis in Gaza that many say Washington is complicit in? Now, to take this further, we are being joined by Jonah Blan from Washington, D.C. He is the former foreign policy advisor to President Joe Biden and also a senior journalist and author. Mr. Blan, thank you so much for joining us here on WION. We have been seeing recurring protests across the United States who have been calling Joe Biden, the U.S. president, complicit in the alleged genocide that's taking place in the West Bank. I want to ask you, while we see these protests, how much of this can we see actually having an impact on the November ballot?
Well, thank you for having me. This is a very important question, and you're absolutely right. These protests are a very significant movement. This is not just a surface manifestation. this shows a deep alienation among some key groups that President Biden will have to regain the trust of in order to succeed in November. These include not just Muslim and Arab voters, but also young voters, progressive voters, people of color, and really anyone who is concerned about human rights in U.S. foreign policy.
Right. Mr. Blank, some might argue that Joe Biden is at the behest of this because he's the incumbent president right now. Because what choice do the voters have? Even if it's Donald Trump or any other Republican who comes to power, the foreign policy of the United States has been pro-Israel for a long time now. So what choice do the voters have is my central question.
And that's a very good question, because even if you object to President Biden's policy in Israel and Gaza, Donald Trump is unquestionably far more hostile to Palestinian interests and far more supportive of the very furthest right wing in the Israeli political spectrum than Joe Biden is. That's been proven in the past, and it will definitely be even more so the case if he were to return to power. So the question is not really so much, will those who are disillusioned with President Biden on the issue of Gaza vote for Trump? It's, will they simply stay home or perhaps vote for a third-party candidate, which achieves the same thing?
Absolutely, Mr. Blank. You point to an important point there. Before I let you go, how much of a say when it comes to elections do the Arab and Muslim voters in the United States have?
Well, they're not typically one of the most high-profile swing groups, but they are disproportionately strong in states that will determine the election. Michigan, the most important of these, but also potentially including Pennsylvania, Georgia, Wisconsin, even Arizona. And because all of these states have determined the elections of both 2016 and 2020 by such incredibly narrow margins, even a smallish group can have a determinative impact on the election.
All right, Mr. Blank, thank you so much for joining us here on WION and getting us all your insights.
Thank you for having me.
All right, now Donald Trump's hush money trial has picked up unexpected speed. 7 out of 12 jurors were picked up on the second day of the trial after more than 50 dismissals on day one. It was anticipated that jury selection could take weeks, as finding jurors who do not hold any biases against Trump would be challenging. The process now continues to choose a panel of 12 members and 6 alternatives who can be fair to the former U.S. president, who is seeking re-election this November. Trump faces 34 felony counts of falsifying business records related to hush money payments made to adult film star Stormy Daniels. He could face up to 4 years in jail. Only a unanimous verdict will get him convicted. Even one dissenting voice would see him walk free. Tuesday's process started with jurors going through a questionnaire phase in which they were questioned by the district attorney's office and Trump's lawyers as well. The panelists elected include an information technology worker, an English teacher, an oncology nurse, a sales professional, a software engineer, and 2 lawyers. During the process, Trump appeared composed and was frequently flipping through the process, often leaning back in his chair. And in one instance, Trump was audibly muttering while one of the jurors was speaking. For this behavior, the judge residing the trial admonished Trump, saying that he won't tolerate intimidation against jurors inside the courtroom. Trump has called Judge June Merchan as conflicted. He also called the gag order against him unconstitutional.
We're going to continue our fight against this judge. We think he's totally conflicted. He's a conflicted judge.
There shouldn't be a gag order. Let me just tell you. The gag order is totally unconstitutional. The judge should not be there. The judge is highly conflicted. He should not be there.
No other former president in the history of the United States has faced a criminal trial. The hush money trial is the first of 4 criminal cases that will begin against Trump. Selecting the jury is the first step in the trial, which is expected to feature testimonies of several key characters in the case. They include Michael Cohen, Stormy Daniels, and Trump's personal lawyer, who went to prison over the scandal.
This is a great group right here.
Now, that was just one of the 4 criminal cases against Donald Trump. Another one is to do with the January 6th Capitol riots and how the case against another accused with the same charges is panning tells us what's to come for Trump.
Conservative judges on the U.S. Supreme Court appeared to side with an accused January 6th rioter in his obstruction case on Tuesday. The case could possibly affect the prosecution of Donald Trump, who faces the same charge for trying to overturn his 2020 election loss. With a 6-3 majority on the bench, conservative justices heard an appeal from Joseph Fisher, a January 6th defendant and former police officer in Pennsylvania, and they expressed concern at an obstruction provision applied to his case. The provision stemmed from the 2002 Sarbanes-Oxley Act, drawn up after the Enron accounting fraud scandal. A lawyer for Fisher argued prosecutors had misapplied the evidence tampering statute to his client's case. Conservative justices appeared skeptical of the Justice Department's broad reading of the statute, a reading that considers the Capitol attack an act to prevent congressional certification of President Joe Biden's victory over Trump. Conservative Chief Justice John Roberts suggested it only applied to defendants who alter or destroy evidence. Liberal justices challenged this narrower view of the law, while Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar tried to remind the court Fisher's actions on January 6th impeded law enforcement officers from regaining control of the Capitol and letting Congress finish its work. The Supreme Court's ruling is expected by the end of June. A decision dismissing Fisher's case would likely prompt resentencing or requests for new trials for some 350 people charged with obstruction in the Capitol attack. Experts say such a ruling could also make it more complicated, but not impossible to make Trump's obstruction-related charges stick. The former president faces 4 federal criminal charges brought against him by special counsel Jack Smith, including conspiring to defraud the United States, corruptly obstructing an official proceeding and conspiring to do so, and conspiring against the right of Americans to vote. Trump aims to throw out those charges by arguing he is entitled to presidential immunity, and the Supreme Court will hear his case on April 25th.
Now, the big story, less than 48 hours to go for the first phase of elections in India. Political parties and their star leaders are pulling out all stops in a last-ditch attempt to woo the voters. From the Congress party to the ruling BJP, seasoned leaders were out and about in the last leg of election campaigning before the first phase of polls on April 19th. And all sides left no stones unturned in taking pointed digs at political rivals or making promises to India's vote bank.
Teaching me many things about politics.
साथियों, आज पूरे देश में मोदी की गारंटी चल रही है और नॉर्थ ईस्ट तो खुद ही मोदी की गारंटी का गवाह है। जिस नॉर्थ ईस्ट को कांग्रेस ने सिर्फ समस्याएं दी थी, उसे बीजेपी ने संभावनाओं का स्रोत बना दिया है। कांग्रेस ने अलगाववाद को खाद पानी दिया, मोदी ने पूर्वोत्तर को गले लगाने का काम किया। मोदी ने शांति और सुरक्षा के लिए प्रयास किए। जो कांग्रेस के 60 वर्षों में नहीं हुआ, वो मोदी ने 10 वर्षों में करके दिखाया।
मैं सीट्स का प्रेडिक्शन तो नहीं करता हूं, जनरल बात कह सकता हूं कि बीजेपी को मुझे लग रहा था 15-20 दिन पहले कि 180 से 180 तक जाएंगे, अब मुझे लग रहा है 150 तक जाएंगे। हर स्टेट में हमें रिपोर्ट मिल रही है कि हमारा चुनाव इंप्रूव कर रहा है और अंडर करंट है। जहां तक गठबंधन की बात है, यूपी गठबंधन की बात है, बड़ा पावरफुल गठबंधन है और बहुत अच्छा परफॉर्मेंस होगा हमारा उत्तर प्रदेश में।
As the world watches the biggest election unfold, Prime Minister Modi is eyeing a third term in power with a sweeping victory, while the opposition India bloc looks to dismantle the BJP-led NDA alliance's decades-long reign. Voting will be held for 543 Lok Sabha seats in 7 different phases, with the first phase scheduled on April 19th and the 7th phase on June 1st. Counting of votes will take place on June 4th. The elections are crucial for both sides. Let's shift focus now. The European Parliament is one of the largest electorate in the world, second only to India. 400 million people will vote across 27 countries. June's elections are both big and important. They are the first ever after Brexit. 2 wars are ongoing, and it is maintaining a delicate balance of siding with the United States and at the same time not entirely. Now, the Eurobarometer says Europeans' interests in this year's election has significantly risen, with poverty, health, jobs and defence seen as top campaign issues, while the voters realize that the results will have a direct impact on the ongoing wars. Because of contemporary challenges, unfortunately, climate change has gone down the list. There is another aspect, the right-wing turn of the European Union. Another poll suggests that nationalist parties from the far right will make big gains this time. This is good news for the leaders from Italy's Giorgia Meloni to Hungary's Viktor Orban.
The sense of this European election is change the leadership. What is election for? The sense of election is that if the leadership proves to be bad, must be replaced. That's so simple. And this leadership of European Union is simply bad. It's failed.
Reports say that almost 2/3 of EU citizens say that they are quote-unquote likely to vote. Turnout in the last European Parliament election was 50.66%. This was the highest since the year 1994. Now, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's plans to ban smoking has advanced in the Parliament as the House of Commons voted in favour of the measure, although dozens of his own lawmakers voted against it. The bill passed a vote in Britain's Parliament with 383 in favour and 67 against, which means that it will progress to the next stage in the Parliament, where it can be subject to amendment. During the vote, not a single one of the 201 Labour MPs went against the party's instructions to vote against the bill, but 40 did abstain while voting. On the contrary, the bill faced vocal resistance from some Tory MPs against Sunak's flagship plan to ban smoking. Almost half of his own MPs refused to vote. Out of 347 sitting Conservatives, just 178 backed the bill. Some more than 100 abstained or were absent from the vote, while a total of 57 Tories walked through the no lobby. The bill has angered some members of the governing Conservative Party, including his predecessor, former Prime Minister Liz Truss and Boris Johnson, who say that the state should not interfere in how people choose to live their lives. The smoking ban is one of Rishi Sunak's 3 key policies, which he announced at the Tory party conference last year. In a major public health intervention, Rishi Sunak wants to make Generation Alpha, those who are born after 2009, the UK's first smoke-free generation. Vaping products will be excluded from the ban, but the legislation does seek to make vaping less attractive by changing the packaging from today's candy-coloured pastels. The bill is also said to raise the minimum age for buying tobacco every year to try to phase it out eventually. Sunak aims to pass the bill as tobacco is UK's single biggest preventable cause of death, killing 2/3 of long-term users and causing 80,000 deaths every single year. Now, elections have successfully concluded in the Solomon Islands. Thousands of islanders cast their vote with issues of health, education and looming over the Pacific nation.
No, not the outgoing one, because they have nothing to do with education, as well as like the 2019 census reveals that 16% of the total population is disability, people with disabilities. And then within the whole country, nothing is being provided for these people.
This is the first election since the country's Prime Minister severed ties with Taiwan and backed Beijing's One China policy. While the incumbent leader eyes a possible return to power, many voters are concerned about what the ties with China mean for the island nation's regional security and economy.
We have severed ties with Taiwan, and now we have diplomatic ties with China. I think for me, I was hoping that will bring good change for this country, but I've yet to see that happen. It's yet to happen.
With over 720,000 people spread over 900 islands that make up the country, voting day is an immense logistical challenge in the Solomons. The process often lasts for weeks as ballot boxes are voting. Papers are dispatched by boat, car and helicopters to the many far-flung villages. Voters cast their ballot to elect 50 members that make up the national parliament. This is where the post-voting process gets interesting. The islanders do not cast their vote directly to elect a president. They elect representatives, most of whom are independent. These leaders then barter being closed to doors to form a ruling coalition and pick a prime minister then. And with that, we are wrapping up this edition of Race to Power. Thanks for watching with me, Ananya Datta.
Economic turmoil and global unrest have cast a shadow over President Joe Biden's approval ratings.
The rockets are continuing to be fired by Hamas in Gaza, although at a slower rate than previously.
So, right now, we are with the volunteers from the Aleppo municipality. They are still trying to go to the rescue for the people they can find out.
India has emerged as a major diplomatic force at the world stage.
The rising cost of living in Nigeria continues to impact citizens from all walks of life.
The citizens of Gujarat witnessed a mega roadshow here in the city of Ahmedabad.
China is South Africa's largest trading partner for 134 years straight.
A domestic aircraft carrying 72 people on board crashed in Pokhara city in central Nepal.
165 injured have been moved, 61 people are confirmed dead and rescue operations continue around me.
After receiving an entire season's rainfall in a span of 48 hours, Chennai city has literally been brought to its knees.
For WION, World is One.
WION Health Resort is unique, the only one of its kind. Experience the 4 paths of natural wellness: yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy. Each uniquely customized program improves the whole person to make every person whole. Come to WION Health Resort. Make your reservation at WION.com.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
The stage is set for the world's biggest elections as India goes to polls for 102 seats in Phase 1. Spread over 21 states and union territories, millions will decide the fate of 1,625 candidates, 134 of whom are female. The BJP-led NDA is locked in a high-stakes battle with the Congress DMK combined for Tamil Nadu, as the BJP eyes more seats from the south. India elections, WION continuous coverage.
Ready to dive into your daily dose of news?
Bringing you what's trending in the West and all that's setting trends in the East.
And all of this served up with a side of insightful banter.
We don't just bring you the latest stories.
We bring you your talking points for the day.
And while you do that, from the busy streets of New York, I will provide you with deeper insights on the developments through the course of the day in the US.
And I will be here at the WION headquarters, getting you all the action from the universe of sport. All that you need to know about your favorite teams and players. Right here.
The show that keeps you ahead of the global curve. A conversation you'd want to be a part of. A place where news becomes an engaging exchange.
We bring you stories that impact your present.
This is World DNA. Join the conversation.
The biggest democratic exercise on the planet ever. Decoding the multiple colors of this multi-dimensional, multi-layered spectacle. WION deciphers the images and the hues, sifts